Hey everyone, Lucy here. Beautiful late spring day, and we're just having a little. There was a Reddit discussion going on um, that kind of got me thinking about the whole storage condition. What's right, what's wrong, controversy, what's good, what's not. Um, I've I've had an opinion about this for quite a few years, but I don't always, um, kind of clearly put it into words. I think the thing to remember is pu'er is enjoyed all over China. I mean, traditionally it was a Hong Kong, Guangdong um, tea, typically, and then people in the Cantonese speaking people in Guangdong and Hong Kong in that area were the main consumers of pu'er up until in Taiwan as well, and in Malaysia, and also other parts of China, and outside of China as well, um, Malaysia and Singapore. But up until probably the last 20 years, there just really wasn't much pu'er being consumed in Yunnan, actually. I mean, there was, but not compared to Guangdong. And I think actually, even to this day, um, the Guangzhou Fangchuan tea market, I'm sure, has more pu'er tea than the two Kunming markets combined. So, you know, I recognize that um, wetter stored pu'er, like you have in Hong Kong or Guangzhou or Malaysia, is considered the traditional. Also, some people want to call it the traditional stored pu'er, and that's fine. I mean, they're words and they're constructs, and I think ultimately, um, it really has a lot to do with what you prefer, And I don't think that there's any right or wrong. There's a lot of things about, oh well, I'm afraid that if I buy pu'er and I don't know how to store it, it's going to turn out badly. That's true. I mean, yeah, if you mess up the storage really badly, it's gonna, you're gonna mess up the tea. Um, the error that I am hearing from some of my customers that happens more often is not that the tea turns out too dry, but that they're trying to build these pomodors and they're putting water here, and then suddenly the tea is going bad and molding because you're creating these artificial aging environments for the tea. I have yet to have complaints from people that said, I stored my tea and it was so dry and I couldn't drink it and it was terrible. So, I mean, I tell people I would err on the side of storing it a little bit dry as opposed to trying to create an environment around it that doesn't naturally exist. But anyways, I'm going to drink this tea here. I might as well give it a little introduction. This is my 6 ripe tea blend that I'm going to press a cake of. And I've been toying with this blend for, I don't know, a couple months now. And I think I finally got it where I want it to be. So anyways, I'm just drinking this tea. It's kind of weird to sit here and talk about tea but not drink tea. So got Lucy here. She's a good girl. Aren't you, Lucy? But anyways, yeah, back to the, there's kind of I think there's kind of a bias that, people have. For example, one day I was sitting in my friend Hailong's tea shop in Kunming, and an old Guangdong guy came in, probably from Guangzhou, and Hailong poured him a cup of, I don't know, maybe it was 2-3-year-old raw pu'er. It was young raw pu'er, and he drank it, and he's like, this isn't pu'er, this is green tea. He used the word green tea. He said, 绿茶，这个是绿茶，这个不是普洱茶. This is green tea, this isn't pu'er. And And my friend Hailong kind of was just, he was kind of holding back out of respect. The guy was older, and he obviously wanted to give him a mouthful. Um, but the old guy, I think he knew that it was pu'er, but in his mind, it wasn't pu'er that he would drink. It wasn't pu'er yet because it wasn't aged, and it wasn't aged, like he was used to having in Guangzhou. Um, and it was at that time that I realized, oh, okay, well, it just popped into my head. This is a bias, this is a cultural thing. And that's fine, and that's totally fine. And I think that it exists to this day. There's a lot of people who prefer that kind of tea, and I do enjoy kind of wetter stored pours, and that's why I've also added, like to my website a couple years ago, the Guangdong and Sichuanbana aged pu'ers. On my new site, it's under pu'er storage area or storage region, and then under there's a few different storage regions that we represent. So I myself prefer kind of like the drier aged, like Kunming aged. If it's well aged, it can't be too dry. But I also like the Guangdong aged ones as well. I tend to prefer, I kind of split Guangdong between dry Guangdong and wet Guangdong stored, because, and really it's not an either or. It's really a spectrum, and I think that Kunming storage is also a spectrum too, believe it or not, because you can, the storing tea on the first floor versus the second floor, storing it next to a busy road or in a residential area like where our storage is, where it's surrounded by trees. My mother-in-law, because we have a little bit of land on either side of the warehouse, because it's a residential unfinished space. We just filled it with tea, and then we've got this front and back. There's trees. There's my mother-in-law is growing like a ton of food for our employees, so because she makes them lunch, and she grows a bunch of food there. So I guess what I'm saying is that just within Kunming and within Guangdong or wherever, there's going to be different storage. There's going to be different conditions, and there's going to be different outcomes. Pollution is a huge aspect. Obviously, people talk about humidity. That's probably the biggest aspect: humidity and temperature. But I think most places you can find a suitable place to store the tea. I know I have customers who store tea in Arizona, and they built like a little wine cellar type thing, or I don't know if they built it or it would exist in the house. So there are ways, to store the tea, and I think this kind of like cut and dry. The only way to enjoy tea or an aged tea is to get one that has been stored in Hong Kong or Malaysia. And I just don't buy that. And my experience, I mean, I've drank 20 plus year old Kunming's aged Monghai Tea Factory teas that were phenomenal, and actually, in my opinion, better than their wetter stored counterparts. And in fact, they sell for higher prices because not everybody is looking for sweet, easy drinking, smooth tea, and that's fine if you are. I'm not judging that, but I think that if you're coming into raw pu'er and that's the only thing that you're looking for, that's fine. And maybe finding some of those wetter stored teas are going to be the right choice for you, because those are going to, a lot of that, the heat and humidity knocks out a lot of that astringency and bitterness, and it transforms it into something different. And that's, and that's fine. I think the main point that I'm making here is that it's really kind of a cultural bias, or not necessarily cultural bias, but where you're coming from and what you appreciate. And everybody has their biases, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I think that admitting that we have biases, admitting that I prefer the stronger Kunming gauge, that's my bias. That's just what I like. I think that there's a lot to drinking those teas, because after 10 or 20 years, you can still taste, the regional, if it's a single estate type tea, you can still really taste that and it comes out. And I like that. I appreciate that. I think last year, Hai Long and I drank his 2006 Lao Banjiang, which is a classic tea. Oh, this is nice. This is like drinking dried cherries and a little chocolatey, bitter, crisp. This is going to be a good tea. Anyways, so Hai Long had a friend in Dongguan, which is in Guangdong, and similar climate to Hong Kong or Guangzhou. And he had stored Hai Long's 2006 Lao Banjiang cake there for, I guess, 10 years. And Hai Long, of course, had his Kunming stored in his storage for 10 years. And we drank them side by side. And they were both good. Myself and Hai Long preferred the Kunming stored one. It still had a lot of that Lao Banjiang-iness, that I've known for years and grown to love. That character, that bitter, but with the strong hui gan, hui tian, the returning taste and flavor, feelings, very strong. The chachi was out of this world. The Dongguan stored one was excellent. It was a little bit musty in the early steeps, which is, but that passed pretty well. It was fairly clean, cleanly stored there in Dongguan, and it was very nice, and it had sweetness, but I didn't really taste as much of that Lao Banjiang character. And our friend from Dongguan, who's also good friends with Hai Long, I mean, he preferred his, and it really got me thinking about that he had a relationship with that tea, and Hai Long had the relationship, and I had the relationship with the Kunming tea, and it's that relationship, I think, that is kind of really the profound aspect, I think, of drinking these teas. And when you have that relationship, I mean, it's like a dog. I see Lucy, and I see, she communicates with me, and I see, the things that she does, and I understand them immediately because I've been with her for 6 years. And I see other dogs, and I like other dogs, but I don't always understand them, or I have that deep relationship with them because I just haven't been able to grow attached to them because I haven't spent time with them, not that I couldn't. And I think that the teas are similar in that regard. Which comes to the next point, which I think is also really profound, which is what is like the pinnacle? Well, I'll put this out there because I think some people feel that the pinnacle of pu'er is aged pu'er, and I'd like to counter that with the pinnacle of pu'er is here, now, and into the future, and it's really that relationship that you have, getting back to the relationship and the appreciation, and being able to sit down with the teas and experience them now when they're young, or a year out, or 5 years out, or 10 years out. To me, that's much more profound than saying, having this like future thing that I'm delaying my gratification for, which is, humans love to do that. They love to delay gratification and this future hope that everything's going to be better. And it may be great in the future, but what's keeping you from experiencing the tea right now and getting in touch with what the tea is, because it's the same thing, It's like Lucy when she was a young pup. She was a freaking nut. I mean, I have, repetitive stress injuries in my elbows and stuff from having her on a leash, out and, she grew up in Kunming, so I had her on a leash most of the time, but she was just this wild thing, and she would bark and lunge at dogs, and she was, she wasn't aggressive necessarily, but I think she liked to mezzo them, and now she's just super mellow. I take her take her to the river, and I let her off the leash, and there's other dogs around, and there's kids around, and I never used to let her around kids because she'd get all hyper with them. And but I mean, that's the thing, is everything's changing all the time, and I think the tea has its own character. And now I think back to those times. Sometimes Lucy's tired, she doesn't want to do something, she doesn't want to go on a run with me, which I used to bring her on every single one of my runs. Now she doesn't want to go. Sometimes she just wants to chill out, and that's okay. But I think back to those times when she was younger and I was just tearing my hair out. Well, because she was just so. And now I think back to those times and I almost tear up because that was her. She had all that power and all that energy. So I think again, it's about sitting with the teas and having that relationship with them. I'm sorry, I got a little bit off topic here, but I think that really, the whole idea that aging is the pinnacle, kind of where you want to get to. I just would encourage people to make your experience with the tea now as profound as you can. And even though these young teas, they have a lot of, they're not sweet and they're not easy. And that's why I've come out with a lot of these, wild arbor, old tree, single estate style teas too, because they have that power and they have that depth. They also have bitter and astringency, but they have a lot of different things going on with them. And I think that, being afraid of bitter and astringent, and it's a feeling, it's a taste in the mouth. It's like spicy or something, it's something, it's reacting with you, and kind of putting a label on it like bitter is bad. It's interesting because in Chinese medicine and Chinese, traditional Chinese food, traditionally Chinese used food as medicine, and of course, whatever we are what we eat, right? But being able to eat and consume, bitter things, astringent things, has a huge benefit for the body. Now, of course, if it's excessive, if you drink an excessive amount of young raw pu'er, depending on your body type and your diet and all your other health concerns, whether you have them or not, that can be an issue. But I think that the teas are there. They're there for you to experience. I want to drink a little bit of this here. I'd like to do another video talking a little bit about how to store tea. I have to be honest with you, though, I don't have a lot of experience with things like pomodors and things like that, because the scale at which I store tea is just much too large. So recently moved to Texas. I'm living in kind of rural central Texas between Austin and San Antonio, and it's very humid here in the summer. In much of the year it's quite humid, and I'm really excited about storing tea here. So, but I also stored tea in Central Oregon, and it was fine. It aged. I do recommend that people find a place kind of that shares the space with them. If it's your living space, typically, it's not going to be super dry, even in colder climates. I think in Bend, we averaged about 50 to 60% humidity in the house. I had a room there. So I think the main thing is, you don't want your living space to be 20 or 30% humidity. So just for your own, well-being, that's very dry. But anyways, I think that's about it. I'm not sure I answered any questions. It's more of, I think, a philosophical kind of an issue and a discussion. And I welcome your comments and questions about kind of what you think. And again, just to recap, wet stored, dry wet stored. I don't think that there's any one way to do it. I know that a lot of people are going to vastly prefer teas that have been stored in one condition over another, or certain types of teas stored in a wetter stored or a drier stored, and other types of teas maybe in a different type of storage, and that's fine. I think for me and for Yunnan sourcing, I want to be as inclusive as I can to people's desires and what they want. It's not for me to say, it's this or that or the other thing. I don't want to draw any lines. I think that there's a tendency in the pu'er community, both in China and outside of China, to kind of say, there's this whole controversy, Linsang teas don't age well, and, you hear that from people who only deal in Menghai teas or only deal in Yiwu teas, and you'll hear people who store in Guangzhou or Hong Kong or whatever that, those, Kunming teas aren't going to age well, that the dryness just it destroys the tea. I'm just putting out extremes there. I'm not trying to single out any people in particular, but just those different thoughts, those kind of different biases that people have. And I would just encourage everybody to kind of like really look at your own experience and also, talk with other people and get various perspectives, and also to kind of see where if people have a bias. I mean, you could say, well, Scott has a bias because he sources teas from Kunming. Yeah, I mean, nobody's without bias. You pretty much can't exist and have an opinion without being biased. So I'm not by any means saying that, people that have opinions are biased or they prefer one thing over another. But I think it's important that we recognize when that comes into play, and kind of recognize that there's a lot of legitimate ways to enjoy the tea, and there's a lot of legitimate schools of thought about what's good and what's not, and they're all really kind of just based on, and it's in fact, I read an article, there was some article that was being circulated around that was saying that Guangdong stored teas had aflatoxins or some other kind of stuff in them, and that they found that X amount of teas stored in the Guangdong or Hong Kong Guangdong had such and such spores in them and that they weren't safe, and but then I was trying to dig into who funded the article, and it was kind of getting a little bit, so there's a lot of people's livelihoods tied up in this, and mine included. But I'm really want to, offer people what they want. I mean, ultimately, there's what I like. I have to like it. I have to be okay with it if I'm going to offer it. And it actually took me a few years to kind of come around to the Guangdong storage teas and really develop an appreciation for them. And, be honest with you, it wasn't like straight off the bat, I'm like, oh, these are the teas. So, again, that's, I think I'm kind of repeating myself at this point, but pay attention to what you like, get a bunch of different perspectives, and then make your decision, or don't make a decision. Just drink and enjoy the tea, right? That's the whole point. But anyways, I'm done. I'm going to drink this tea. This is going to be pressed in a couple months, along with our spring teas, which are probably not going to be pressed for a couple months. We got to lab test them. But yeah, 2017 so far is just really rocking. Not only for pu'ers, but for green teas and black teas, and I'm hoping that the new 2017 oolongs are going to be coming out soon. Those are going to be rock solid, from what I'm hearing. So yeah, check that out, And give a thumbs up to Lucy if you like our video, because she's the inspiration for all the videos. Just kidding.